Tonight's new developments in the Russia investigation, being reported by the New York Times and the Washington Post, have new details on the material the Mueller team is requesting from the White House. The special prosecutors team wants the White House to hand over material in 13 different categories, including some of the president's most well-known decisions and actions while president. Sources tell the Times and the Post that the Mueller team wants details on the firing of former National Security Advisor General Michael Flynn, the firing of former FBI Director James Comey, also President Trump's meeting with Russian officials the day after Comey's firing, where he discussed that firing. They also want any documents or information about Donald Trump Jr.'s meeting at Trump Towers with Russians back in June, and discussions of how to respond to the New York Times questions about that meeting, those questions being asked this year. And Sally Yates meetings. They also want information on Sally Yates meetings, Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates meetings, and conversations with Trump lawyer, the White House counsel, Don McGahn, about Michael Flynn. One government official told the Washington Post this investigation will run to completion even if they fire Mueller. There is a feeling of inevitability now that we didn't have before, not of the outcome of the investigation, but that there will be an outcome. There is no escaping this thing, whatever the conclusions. The Washington Post was first to report tonight that the Mueller team has in its possession an email from Paul Manafort, Trump's former campaign chair, offering private campaign briefings to a Russian billionaire who is part of Vladimir Putin's inner circle. Though Manafort's spokesman, through Manafort's spokesman, NBC News has now confirmed through that spokesman that Manafort made that offer, did actually make that offer. The Washington Post says investigators believe that the exchanges, which reflect Manafort's willingness to profit from his prominent role alongside Trump, created a potential opening for Russian interests at the highest level of a U.S. presidential campaign. So far this week in Manafort news, we have the report that federal investigators told Paul Manafort that he would be indicted shortly after his Virginia home was raided with a search warrant, and a report that Paul Manafort was wiretapped at various times by federal prosecutors, and now the report about Paul Manafort offering a campaign briefing to a Russian billionaire while he was chairman of the Trump campaign, and it's only Wednesday. Joining us now, Matt Miller, former spokesman for Attorney General Eric Holder and an MSNBC contributor, and Jill Wine-Banks, former assistant Watergate special prosecutor and an MSNBC contributor. And Jill, I want to go to your prosecutor's prism as you look at this developing information of everything that we just discussed. Take your pick, but in particular, please do address this report that we have about Paul Manafort reaching out to a Russian billionaire, offering campaign briefings, trying to make a point of contact with a Russian billionaire and the point of contact being about the campaign.
It's so outrageous that we keep seeing these repeating efforts to reach out to the Russians. There is something there for sure. In the case of Paul Manafort, he has made millions working for Russian allies, and he is going to keep on trying to make money out of it. But to do it while he was in the White House is really beneath any ethical standard that even the Trump White House has had. So it's something that is very promising in terms of what could come of this. I think that there will be some cases. The telling him that he might be indicted is something that's not that uncommon. It's sometimes used as a way to say to somebody, if you want to make a proffer of evidence and you want to come clean, this is the time to do it. This is the time to flip and protect yourself. So maybe that's going to happen. Anything could happen in this situation.
And news from inside the world of Trump staff tonight. At George Washington University, the Trump campaign's former campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, said this tonight: if Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, or Rick Gates, or Carter Page, or anybody else attempted to influence the outcome of the U.S. election through any means that's inappropriate, through collusion, coordination, or cooperation, I hope they go to jail for the rest of their lives. And Matt Miller, that's Corey Lewandowski, who previously held the position of constantly denying that anyone involved in the Trump campaign could ever be up to anything.
Yeah, that's right. I think what you see Corey Lewandowski doing is trying to settle a little bit of a personal score. Obviously, he was fired from the campaign and replaced by Paul Manafort and has long had it out for him. The problem with that argument, though, is when you look at the scope of Mueller's request to the White House, his request for documents, they don't just involve one person. It's not just Paul Manafort. It's not just Michael Flynn. You know, sometimes when we look at the individual strands of this investigation, it's like looking at individual trees and missing the forest. You see, Flynn is one tree, Manafort is one tree. This meeting supposedly on adoption that the president's son held is another one. And when you look at the scope of all these documents, you see they're looking at not just individual actions by Manafort or by Flynn, but also by the president's son and also by the president himself. And I thought it was notable in the request that we saw. He's not just examining whether the president obstructed justice, as if that's a small deal, but it's one we already knew about. He's also looking at why the president instructed his staff to lie about the meeting his son held. It's clear there's one thread running throughout this overall request, and that is, to what extent was the White House compromised? Was it just Paul Manafort during the campaign? Was it just Mike Flynn, the national security advisor for the first month, or did it go as high as the president of the United States himself?
We're going to hear from Senator Chuck Grassley now, and something he said today. He's the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. He's been trying to get Paul Manafort to respond to the Judiciary Committee. Let's listen to this.
From a layman's point of view, as chairman of the committee, not as a lawyer, we have tried to talk to Manafort's lawyers for weeks, and we don't get a phone call return. That would mandate that we have a subpoena. I don't know whether it's worth issuing subpoenas when somebody's been indicted, if there's any value in that, if you get any outcome out of it.
Is he going to be indicted? What's your understanding?
All I know is what I saw on maybe your channel or somebody else's channel.
Jill, your interpretation of that?
Well, he's right. I heard it on MSNBC that Paul Manafort was told that he would be indicted. And as I said, that's not that uncommon. So it's quite possible he was told that. But also, given what we know about everything that has been taken from his home in Arlington and all of the testimony he's already provided, it does sound like he is a good target for indictment. And it's really interesting to watch all of these steps and the pieces of the puzzle being put together. I think it's going to be something big, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm loving listening to the news and hearing what's going on. And
Paul Manafort's lawyers have clearly decided these congressional investigative committees mean nothing to us. Our problem is with a federal prosecutor. That's much more serious. Jill Wine-Banks and Matt Miller, thank you both for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.